The phone rings at 6:47 a.m. Not my phone, the landline in the kitchen. My mother picks it up before I can even remember what day it is. I'm still half asleep upstairs when I hear her voice change. That specific tone, the one she only uses when something terrible has happened. No, that can't be right. There must be a mistake. I'm out of bed in seconds. By the time I reach the kitchen, she's sitting at the table with her hand covering her mouth. The phone is still in her other hand. I can hear a man's voice on the other end, talking. Something about fraud, something about misappropriation of funds. Is this about Maya? I ask her. She doesn't look at me, just shakes her head slowly. The voice on the phone keeps talking. 20 minutes later, there's a knock on the door. Not a polite knock. The kind that means police. 2 officers in uniform, one holding a warrant, the other holding a folder thick enough to hold my entire life. They're looking for my father. They want to ask him about wire fraud spanning 18 months, about stolen client money, about false accounting records, about a woman named Sarah Chen and a business deal that never actually happened. My father, David Harris, is not home. But they're coming back. And they're bringing more questions. 3 weeks before that morning, I was invisible in all the right ways. My name is Emma. I'm 28 years old. I work as a financial analyst at a mid-sized consulting firm called Harmon and Associates. I've been there for 4 years. I have a decent salary, a small apartment in the city, and a life that nobody would call exceptional. That was exactly how I liked it. I grew up in the suburbs, same neighborhood my whole childhood. The kind of place where houses get repainted every 5 years and everyone knows each other's business, but pretends they don't. My father, David Harris, is a man who has always been very careful about his image. He's a financial advisor, independent, works out of a small office downtown. He has clients who trust him with their money. He has a reputation. He has standing in the community. He wears suits to breakfast on Sunday. My mother is named Patricia. She volunteers at the library. She makes casseroles for church functions. She has a garden. She's the kind of woman who gets compliments on her composure in public, but has quiet anxiety when no one's watching. My brother Marcus is 3 years younger. He's a software engineer. He lives across the country now. We text sometimes. We don't talk much, not the way siblings sometimes do. It's more like we're pleasant acquaintances who share a childhood. For as long as I can remember, my father has been distant. Not cruel, just distant. Like he was always thinking about something else. Some calculation happening in the back of his mind that took his attention away from us. When I was 12, he missed my school play. He had a client emergency, he said. When I was 16, he didn't come to my graduation. He was out of town for a conference. When I got into university, he looked at my acceptance letters like they were documents he had to file away, not moments we celebrated together. I stopped trying to make him proud around age 18. But I also never stopped hoping he would look at me the way I saw other fathers look at their daughters. My mother always made excuses for him. He's just stressed about work, she'd say. You know how he gets when there are difficult clients. Or sometimes, quietly, almost to herself, he just needs some space. What she meant was, he just needs space from us. I moved out at 24. It wasn't dramatic. I just found an apartment I could afford and told them I was going. My father didn't ask many questions. My mother cried for an evening and then asked for my new address. For 4 years, I saw them on holidays. Thanksgiving, Christmas, my mother's birthday, forced gatherings where my father would ask about my job in a general way and then talk about his clients or something he'd read in the financial news. I became very good at not expecting anything from him. I became very good at managing my disappointment. I built a quiet life. I went to work. I did my job well. I had 2 friends from college I'd see for drinks sometimes. I went to the gym. I read at night. I saved my money. I didn't trust easily, but I didn't need much. I was self-sufficient. I was careful. I thought I was safe. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon in March. My father's number. Unusual for him to call during the day. "Hi, Dad," I said. "Emma, I need to talk to you about something. Not over the phone. Can you come home this weekend?" There was something in his voice, something I'd never heard before, something that sounded like he actually needed something from me. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "Just come," he said. That Saturday, I drove to the house I grew up in. My mother hugged me at the door. My father was in his office, the small room off the living room that was always his space. He closed the door when I came in. "I have a situation," he said. "A business situation, and I need your help." He told me about a client, a woman named Sarah Chen, wealthy, recently divorced. She wanted to invest a significant amount of money, $200,000. There was an opportunity, a commercial property development deal on the edge of the city. The returns would be substantial, 30% over 18 months. He'd already invested his own money, $50,000. He was asking the client to co-invest with him. The problem was the paperwork, the legal structure. My company, Harmon and Associates, works with complex financial documentation. I have access to templates, to frameworks, to the kind of language that makes something sound legitimate. "I need you to create some documents," he said. "Nothing illegal, just structured, professional, so the client feels confident." I remember the exact moment. I understood what he was asking. "Dad, what are you asking me?" "I'm asking you to help me make a business look real." The words hung in the air between us. "No," I said. "You don't even know what I'm asking yet." "I know exactly what you're asking. You want me to fabricate financial documents for an investment that probably doesn't exist. You want me to help you commit fraud." He stood up from his desk. He was very calm. "I want you to help your father," he said. "I can't do that." "Why not? You work with financial documents every day. This is nothing you don't already know how to do." I was shaking, I remember that. My hands were shaking. "Because it's illegal, because it's wrong, because if I get caught, I'll lose my job, I could go to prison." He looked at me like I'd said something deeply disappointing. "You've always been like this," he said quietly. "Always so rigidly concerned with rules, never willing to bend, never willing to help your family when it matters. Helping you commit fraud isn't the same as helping my family." "Isn't it? Do you know what happens if I don't find investors? Do you know what my business looks like if I can't deliver the deals I promise? I'll lose everything, Emma, everything I built. Your mother will lose the house. And you? Well, I suppose you're safe in your little apartment with your little job." He said it with contempt, not anger, contempt. "I won't do it," I said. "Think about it," he said. "At least think about it before you leave." I didn't think about it. I left within an hour. I drove back to the city with my hands tight on the wheel and my jaw so clenched I thought my teeth might crack. I didn't call him back. But he called me 3 times over the next 2 weeks. The first time, he asked again, could I reconsider? The second time, he told me he'd already started the investment. Could I at least help him document it properly after the fact? The third time, he said things I still remember with absolute clarity. "You've made your choice," he said. "You've chosen your job over your family. You've chosen your morality over your father. I hope it makes you very happy." I hung up on him. I didn't know he'd already done it without me. I didn't know about Sarah Chen yet. I didn't know that my father had taken her $200,000 and invested it in exactly nothing. I didn't know that he was going to blame me for the entire scheme. I didn't find out until my mother called me, almost hysterical, at 6:47 a.m. on a Wednesday morning in April. The police came back on Thursday. I was at work when my boss called me into his office. My boss is a man named Richard Harmon. He's in his 50s. He's been very good to me. He respects competence. I've always been competent. "Emma, I need to talk to you about your father," he said. My stomach dropped. "There's a police investigation. Wire fraud. A woman has filed a civil suit. She's also considering pressing criminal charges." The investigating detective called us because your name appears in some documents, allegedly fabricated documents. I started. I know you didn't, Richard said. I've worked with you for 4 years. I don't believe you're involved in fraud, but the documents are sophisticated. They use language patterns from our firm. Someone is trying to make it look like they came from your work. Someone, my father. What do the documents say? I asked. I can't show them to you yet, not until the investigation moves forward. But Emma, you might need a lawyer. I hired a lawyer that night. His name is Tom Chen. He's recommended by a friend of a friend. He's expensive. He's also terrifyingly competent. The moment I explained the situation, he said the same thing Richard Harmon had said, but with more urgency. Your father is committing fraud and attempting to implicate you. We need to protect you immediately. On Friday, the police came to my apartment. 2 different officers than before. They had questions. They had printouts of documents that looked like they came from my computer. Documents I'd never seen before. A signature that looked like mine but wasn't quite right. I answered their questions. I asked to have Tom present. He told me to tell the truth and nothing but the truth. The truth was, I had nothing to do with this. I had refused to help my father. I had no knowledge of Sarah Chen's investment beyond what my mother had told me. Do you have documentation of your refusal? One of the officers asked. No, I said. I told him in person. Then he called me multiple times and I refused again. But you never put it in writing. No, I didn't think I needed to file a report with my father saying I wouldn't commit fraud with him. The officer didn't smile. They took my phone, my laptop. They said they'd be in touch. Tom drove me home afterward. This is going to get worse before it gets better, he said. Your father is facing serious charges. His best defense is going to be to shift blame, to make you look like the architect of this while he claims he was duped. Since he's trying to implicate you in the documents themselves, the prosecution will need to prove it was him, not you. That's a timeline problem. That's a technical problem. How long will this take? I asked. Months, maybe longer. The newspapers picked up the story by Sunday. Local news. A headline about a financial advisor accused of running a Ponzi-style investment scheme. No names at first, just a man in his late 50s and his young protege in the financial industry. By Monday, they had names. The story got worse because my father, in a moment of stunning strategy, gave an interview to a reporter. He said he'd been deceived. He said a young analyst, he didn't name me, but everyone could figure it out, had come to him with an investment opportunity. He said he'd trusted her because she worked in finance. He said she'd leveraged his reputation to deceive vulnerable clients. He said he was the victim. My phone started ringing. Friends from college called asking if it was really me. People from the gym I went to suddenly didn't make eye contact. My mother called, crying, saying she believed me, but that my father was saying things in the house that were making her question everything. What things? I asked. He's saying you were always bitter about not having more money. He's saying you were jealous of his success. He's saying you wanted revenge. I closed my eyes. Mom, I didn't do this. I know, she whispered. I know you didn't, but he's so convincing when he talks about it. He cries, he's so sure. That's when I understood. My father wasn't just lying. My father was absolutely convinced his own version of the story. He had rewritten history so completely that he believed I was the villain. That made him 1,000 times more dangerous than if he was consciously lying. A man who knows he's lying can sometimes be reasoned with. A man who believes his own lie is a man who will destroy you without guilt. The investigation took 3 months. 3 months of police interviews. 3 months of my lawyer sending letters. 3 months of the newspapers running stories that slowly shifted from local advisor accused to pair accused to young analyst maybe primary architect. 3 months of people stopping conversations when I walked into rooms. 3 months of not going home, of my mother making excuses not to see me, of Marcus calling from across the country saying, "This is crazy, everyone knows you didn't do this." while still keeping careful distance from the situation. 3 months of my father, at every turn, telling a story where I was the perpetrator and he was the betrayed, the duped, the victim. In July, the prosecutor's office made their decision. They weren't charging me. The evidence was clear. The documents were sophisticated, but they didn't match my typical work patterns. The timeline was wrong. My refusal to help was documented by my therapist. I had started seeing one in March, right after my father's first request, and my contemporaneous emails to my mother saying I'd refused him. My father was being charged with wire fraud, embezzlement, and operating an unlicensed investment scheme. Sarah Chen would get some of her money back, not all. The legal process would take years. I was cleared, but the clearance felt hollow. Because even though the prosecutor believed me, everyone else was still uncertain. Even though the facts supported my innocence, the story had already taken root. I was the ambitious young woman who'd gotten in over my head. My father was the foolish older man who'd trusted the wrong person. We were locked in a narrative together, and no amount of legal truth could undo that. My boss was supportive. Tom Chen assured me the charges against me would be formally dismissed. My mother started returning my calls. But something in me had shifted. The person I was, careful, rule-following, trusting in justice and truth, had been exposed as naive. I had done everything right. And it hadn't mattered. My own father had tried to destroy me, not in anger, not in a moment of passion, but deliberately, strategically, completely. And for 3 months, the entire community had been willing to believe him. That taught me something important. That taught me that innocence isn't a protection. That taught me that being right isn't the same as winning. The charges were formally dismissed in August. I remember the day because it was clear and hot, and I sat in Tom Chen's office while he told me it was over, and I felt absolutely nothing. No relief, no triumph, no satisfaction. Just a flat gray emptiness. "You should be happy," Tom said. "This is the best possible outcome." "I know. You've been completely exonerated. Your reputation will recover. The prosecutor's statement was very clear about your non-involvement." "I know. So why do you look like your dog just died?" I thought about that. "Because the outcome doesn't matter," I said finally. "Whether I win or lose, I still got destroyed by my father. Whether the court believes me or not, my father still got to tell a story that half the people in this city still believe. The only thing the dismissal changes is that I won't go to prison. But I already know I won't go to prison. I still get to see him every day of my life knowing what he did." Tom set down his pen. "That's not entirely true," he said slowly. "There's civil court." "What?" "Sarah Chen is still pursuing restitution. She's considering a suit against your father, but also against everyone involved in the investment scheme. If she includes you, you could countersue for defamation, for damage to your reputation, for emotional distress. You could take this to civil court and make him pay." I'd never thought about it before. "Would I win?" I asked. "Based on what I've seen, yes, absolutely." I left his office and drove to my apartment, and I sat on my couch, and for the first time in 5 months, I let myself think clearly about what I wanted. Not what was right, not what was fair, not what the law dictated. What I actually wanted. I wanted my father to understand what he'd done to me. I wanted him to face consequence that actually hurt. I wanted him to lose something he cared about the way he'd tried to take something from me. I wanted him to be afraid the way he'd made me afraid. And I didn't want to feel guilty about any of it. Over the next 2 weeks, something changed in me. It wasn't a dramatic moment. There was no sudden clarity or moment of resolve. Instead, it was more like a process, like a photograph developing. I stopped taking calls from my mother about family drama. I stopped checking the news articles about my father's charges. I stopped explaining myself to anyone. I stopped trying to rebuild my reputation through conversation and apology and evidence of my virtue. Instead, I started paying attention. I started noticing things. I started thinking like someone who was going to win. The first thing I did was call Tom back. I want to know everything about Sarah Chen's situation, I said. Why? He asked. Because I want to understand exactly how much money my father took and where it went and what he did with it. I want to know the mechanics of the fraud. I want to understand his thinking. That's therapeutic, Tom said carefully. No, I said. It's practical. If I'm going to sue him, I need to understand the case better than anyone else. I need to know it from inside. Tom sent me the court filings, hundreds of pages of documents. I read them all. I made notes. I created a timeline. What emerged was a picture of my father's thinking that was almost fascinating in its desperation. He had been failing. His legitimate investment business had been declining for years. Clients were retiring. The market was volatile. He'd made some bad choices. By 2024, he was barely making ends meet. Not broke, not desperate for food, but desperate in the way that someone with a 6-figure lifestyle and a 3-figure income starts to get desperate. He'd convinced himself that if he could just land one big investment, he could turn everything around. One success would buy him time to rebuild. One major client would restore his credibility. Sarah Chen came to him through a mutual acquaintance. She was newly divorced. She'd received a significant settlement. She wanted to invest but didn't want to deal with large brokerage firms. She was perfect. My father had promised her 30% returns. For an investment of $200,000, it was impossible, completely impossible. No legitimate investment could guarantee those returns. But he'd convinced himself he could make it work. He'd taken her money, and then, when the first payment deadline came due, he'd scrambled. He'd invested part of it, a small part, maybe $40,000, in a slightly sketchy commercial real estate deal. He was hoping that would generate enough returns to cover the interest payments to Sarah while he found another investor for the rest. But that investment had stalled. So he'd started looking for another Sarah Chen, another wealthy, vulnerable person with money to invest. That's when he'd approached me. When I refused, he'd panicked. He'd continued the scheme without the documents he'd wanted from me, but he'd wanted them anyway. They were insurance. They were a backup story. They were a way to blame someone else if he got caught. Which is exactly what he tried to do. He was a man in his 60s who suddenly realized his entire life was built on lies and shortcuts and small deceptions that had finally caught up with him. And instead of facing that, he'd tried to destroy his own daughter. I spent 2 weeks understanding my father completely. And then I spent the next month understanding what he owed. Sarah Chen had lost $200,000. She was going to recover maybe 40% of it through the criminal restitution process, which would take years. But there was a document in the filing that caught my attention. Sarah had listed her assets as part of the investigation. She owned a condo. She had investments. She had a job. She was going to be financially fine eventually. But she was also 51 years old, and she'd planned to use that money for her retirement. She'd planned to leave her job in 5 years. That plan was gone. The document included an email from Sarah to the prosecutor. In it, she said, "I trusted him because he was recommended by someone I knew. I trusted him because he seemed professional. I trusted him because I wanted to believe that good things could happen to me again after my divorce. He took that trust, and he used it to destroy my security." I read that email 10 times. Then I called Tom Chen again. "I need to talk to Sarah Chen," I said. "Why?" "Because I want to help her." There was a long pause. "Emma, that's complicated. You're technically an opposing party in her consideration of the lawsuit. If you contact her directly, it could." "I'm not going to contact her directly," I said. "I want you to contact her. I want to offer her information. I want to help her understand the scope of my father's financial situation so her attorneys can figure out how to maximize her recovery." Tom was very quiet. "You're not doing this for justice," he said. "You're doing this for something else." "Yes," I said, "I am." "What?" I'm doing this because my father tried to blame me for what he did. And I'm going to spend the next 3 years making sure that every person he hurt understands exactly what he did and why. I'm going to make sure they know he wasn't a victim of circumstance. He wasn't a foolish man betrayed by a young woman. He was a man who systematically lied and stole and then tried to destroy his own daughter to cover it up. And I'm going to do it all legally and carefully and in a way that nobody can accuse me of being vindictive. I'm just going to be helpful. I'm just going to be honest. And I'm going to help everyone he hurt see him clearly. Tom took a very long breath. That, he said, is the most dangerous thing I've heard you say yet. Good, I said. Are you sure about this? Completely sure. He contacted Sarah Chen's attorney. And that's when everything changed. Sarah Chen's attorney was a woman named Victoria Reeves. She was in her late 40s. She specialized in securities, fraud, and civil recovery. When Tom explained that I wanted to help, Victoria was skeptical. Why would the accused's daughter help the plaintiff? She asked over the phone. Because I was also a victim, I said. I'd asked Tom to put me on the call. And because I want my father to face accurate consequences for what he did, not inflated, not based on emotion, based on facts. Victoria met with me the following week in her downtown office. She was the kind of woman who seemed made of competence. Her office was organized but not sterile. Her questions were sharp. She didn't waste words. Tell me why you're really here, she said. Because if I don't do this, my father walks away from this scandal telling people he was a victim. My mother might even believe it. My brother will stay distant. And Sarah Chen will spend the next 5 years fighting for money she's never going to fully recover. I don't think that's fair. Victoria leaned back in her chair. You understand that civil suits are long and difficult, that the process can be as damaging as the original crime. I do. And you're okay with that. I'm counting on it, I said. We spent 4 hours that day going through everything. Every document from the police investigation, every email, every detail of my father's finances, every client he'd ever worked with, trying to determine if there were other victims. There were. At least 2 other smaller investments my father had made that hadn't been reported in the criminal case. One from a man in his 70s named Mr. Acaffer. One from a middle-aged widow named Jennifer Torres. Both had invested significant money. Neither had been properly documented. Why wasn't he charged with defrauding them? I asked. Because they didn't report it, Victoria said. Sarah Chen did. She was the one who went to the police. The others didn't realize they'd been defrauded. Your father was giving them very slow updates, telling them the investments were still developing, using parts of new investments to pay returns to old ones. It's textbook Ponzi mechanics. So they're still waiting for money. That's never coming. Presumably. I felt something harden in my chest. I want to find them, I said. I want to tell them what happened. Victoria looked at me carefully. That's generous, she said. Or it's very strategic. I haven't decided which. Both, I said. It's both. Over the next 3 months, I did something I'd never done before. I became an investigator. Victoria gave me access to all the documents in her case. I cross-referenced my father's financial records, which I got from the criminal case file, with his client lists, which I obtained from his business license filings. I found bank records. I found emails. I found evidence of every transaction. And I documented it all. I created a master timeline. I created a chart showing every client he'd worked with in the last 10 years. I highlighted the ones who'd been defrauded. I calculated how much each person had lost. It was detailed work, exhausting work, but it was also oddly peaceful. Because while I was doing this work, I wasn't angry. I was focused. I was solving a puzzle. I was building something. I located Mr. Acaffer through his business license. He owned a small grocery store in a neighborhood I didn't usually go to. I called him one evening. Mr. Acaffer, my name is Emma Harris. You don't know me, but I'm calling because I believe my father, David Harris, has defrauded you. There was a very long silence. I don't understand, he said finally. You invested money with him, approximately $70,000, for a commercial real estate investment. Yes, he said slowly. Yes, I did. He said the returns would help fund my daughter's college education. Why are you telling me this? Because the investment doesn't exist, and there's a civil lawsuit against him, and I think you should join it. I spent an hour on the phone with Mr. Ackefer. I explained the fraud. I explained what had happened to Sarah Chen. I explained Victoria Reeves' civil case. He cried a little while we talked. Your own daughter, he said. You're helping us against your own father. Yes, I said. Why? Because it's the right thing to do, I said. And then, more truthfully, because I want him to understand what he took from people. Jennifer Torres was harder to find, but I found her eventually through property records and voting registrations. When I called her, she was even more devastated than Mr. Ackefer. She'd invested $110,000, money from a life insurance payout after her husband died, money she was supposed to live on. She'd been getting small returns, transfers from my father, paid out of money from new clients. She thought she was making money. In reality, she was being robbed by her own faith in him. I'm 63 years old, she said to me when I explained. I was supposed to retire next year. I was supposed to have security. I know, I said. Does he know? Does your father know what he took from me? I think he knows the numbers, I said. I don't think he knows what it means. Can you make him know? I'm going to try, I said. By October, Victoria had 3 clients for her civil case. Sarah Chen, Mr. Ackefer, and Jennifer Torres. Combined, they'd been defrauded of approximately $480,000. My father's total assets, according to his financial disclosures, were approximately $1 million. That included the house, his retirement accounts, his office equipment. A civil judgment against him would be devastating. But I wanted something more than money. I wanted him to face these people. Victoria was skeptical about that. Mediation could be part of the settlement process, she said carefully. But I can't force him to agree to it, and his attorney will almost certainly advise against it. What if Sarah and the others wanted it? I asked. What if they specifically requested it as part of any settlement? Then it becomes a negotiating point. I called Sarah Chen. I want to ask you something, I said, and I want you to know that you can say no and it won't change anything. Okay, she said cautiously. Do you want to see him? Do you want to sit across from him and have him understand, face to face, what he did to you? Sarah was quiet for a long time. Yes, she said finally. Yes, I think I do. Mr. Ackefer wanted it. Jennifer Torres wanted it. Victoria approached my father's attorney with a proposal. A structured mediation where the plaintiffs could present their case directly to David Harris, with the possibility of a settlement on the table. My father's attorney recommended against it. But Sarah Chen's attorney, a man named James Mitchell, was very persuasive. And my father, despite everything, still hadn't completely lost his confidence. He still believed he could talk his way through things. He still thought he was the kind of man who could charm people into seeing his point of view. He agreed to the mediation. It was scheduled for November, 2 days before Thanksgiving. And then I did something I hadn't planned to do. I called my father. He hadn't heard from me directly since May. We'd only communicated through lawyers. The sound of my voice on the phone clearly shocked him. Emma, he said, I wasn't expecting to hear from you. I wanted to tell you something, I said. Before the mediation, I wanted you to know that I'm the one who contacted Sarah Chen's attorney. I'm the one who helped them understand the scope of what you did. I'm the one who found Mr. Ackefer and Jennifer Torres. I'm the one who told them about the fraud. There was absolute silence on the other end. Why would you do that? He asked finally. Because you tried to blame me, I said, and because I want you to understand what you took from people, not theoretically, not as numbers, directly, face to face. Emma. And I wanted you to know that I did it legally. I did it ethically. I did it carefully. I'm not the person you tried to make me out to be. I'm not reckless or vindictive. I won't let you be comfortable with what you did." "This is revenge," he said quietly. "No," I said, "this is consequence." I hung up. 2 weeks later, he hired a new attorney, a man named Robert Castellano, someone with a reputation for aggressive defense and settlement negotiation. I didn't know it yet, but Castellano would recommend something that would change everything. He would recommend that my father cooperate, that he take responsibility, that he make this go away quietly. Because Castellano understood something my father didn't. My father had already lost. The only question left was how much it would cost him. The mediation was scheduled for November 14th at Victoria Reeves' office. I wasn't supposed to be there. As the accused's daughter, my presence would have been complicated, but Victoria asked if I wanted to observe through a window. A one-way window. I could see and hear but not be seen. I said yes. I took the day off work. I dressed carefully. I arrived early. Victoria's mediation room was set up formally. A long table, 3 seats on one side for the plaintiffs, 1 seat on the opposite side for my father. Victoria and James Mitchell sat at the head and foot of the table. Robert Castellano, my father's attorney, sat next to him. Sarah Chen arrived first. She looked smaller in person than she had in photos, more fragile. She was wearing a dark suit. Her hands were shaking. Mr. Ackefer came next. Quiet, dignified, older than I'd imagined. Jennifer Torres was the last to arrive. She was using a cane. She moved slowly. When she sat down, she looked directly at my father with an expression I couldn't quite read. Betrayal, sadness, anger. My father looked like a man about to be executed. He was wearing one of his suits. His hair was grayer than I remembered. His face had lost the careful composure it always had. There were lines under his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Victoria, open the mediation. We're here because these 3 people trusted David Harris with their money. Money that was obtained through fraudulent representations. Before we discuss settlement, the plaintiffs have requested the opportunity to speak directly to the defendant about the impact of his actions." My father's attorney started to object, but Victoria cut him off with a look. "This is mediation, Mr. Castellano. We follow the format the plaintiffs requested." Sarah Chen went first. "My husband died when I was 49, she said, her voice very steady. "I had a good marriage, a good life. When he died, I was devastated, but I also had security. I had the life insurance money. I had time to figure out what came next." She looked at my father. "I trusted you because someone I knew recommended you. I told you I wanted my money to grow slowly and safely. I told you I needed it to last for the rest of my life. You told me you could make that happen. Instead, you lied to me. You took my money and you used it to cover up your own failures. You made me question myself. You made me wonder if I was stupid for trusting you. You took not just my money but my confidence, my sense of security." She stopped. She didn't cry. Her hands just shook. My father said nothing. Mr. Ackefer went next. "I came to this country with nothing," he said. His accent was thick, his English careful. "I worked very hard. I built a business. I worked 80 hours a week so my daughter could go to a good university. When she got accepted to Johns Hopkins, I knew I couldn't afford it. But you told me you could help. You said if I invested with you, I could give her that opportunity. I trusted you with my savings, with my daughter's future." He paused. "My daughter is very smart. She got a scholarship. She's going to Johns Hopkins anyway, but I should have paid for that. I should have given her what I promised. Instead, I have to tell her that a man I trusted stole from me. I have to tell my family that I was foolish." He looked away. Jennifer Torres was the last. "I'm a widow," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it filled the room. "My husband died 5 years ago. He was a good man. He wanted me to be taken care of. That life insurance was his final gift to me. When you told me you could make that money work for me, I believed you. I thought I could retire. I thought I could travel. I thought I could visit my grandchildren without worrying about money. Instead, you're the reason I'm still working at 63 years old. You're the reason I'm probably going to work until I can't work anymore. You took my husband's final gift. You took my freedom." My father was very white. "I want to say something," he said. Robert Castellano put his hand on his arm. "I advise against." "I don't care," my father said. He looked at Sarah first. "You're right. You're absolutely right. I lied to you. I took your money knowing I had no way to make the returns I promised. I did it because I was desperate. I did it because my own business was failing and I couldn't face that failure. That's not an excuse. It's just the truth." He looked at Mr. Ockheffer. "I thought of you as a foolish man," he said, and something in his voice broke. "I thought that your trust was easy to exploit because you wanted to believe too much in easy success. I judged you while I was robbing you. That judgment made it easier. I'm sorry. I'm genuinely sorry." He turned to Jennifer. "You reminded me of my own mother," he said. "She had a certain kindness, a certain willingness to believe in people. I hated that about her when I was young. I thought it was weakness. But you broke my heart when you said you were still working. Because I know you're right. I did that. I stole your retirement. I stole your peace." He put his head down. "I don't deserve any of your forgiveness. I don't deserve anything. But I want you to know that what you said, it's going to stay with me. You've made me see myself in a way I've been avoiding. So thank you for that. I deserve that clarity." The room was completely silent. And then, this is the part I didn't expect, the part that changed something in me. My father said something else. "There's something else you should know," he said. He looked at Victoria. "My attorney has advised me not to say this, but it's relevant." "Advised you not to say what?" Victoria asked carefully. "I want to make a full financial disclosure, not just of my assets, but of a second set of books I've been keeping. Accounts my attorney doesn't know about. Money I've hidden. I want to put all of it on the table, every account, every investment, every dollar I can access." Robert Castellano stood up abruptly. "I'm going to need to speak with my client immediately." "No," my father said. "I'm done. I'm done protecting myself. These people deserve the truth, and they deserve whatever money I have left." I watched through the one-way glass as my father essentially dismantled his own defense. He gave Victoria access to offshore accounts. He disclosed hidden investments. He revealed a safety deposit box full of cash he'd been stashing for years. The total amount he could provide to the plaintiffs came to $620,000. Almost everything he had, except the house and a small portion of his retirement accounts that couldn't legally be touched. It was a complete surrender. When the mediation ended 3 hours later, Sarah Chen looked stunned. Mr. Ockheffer looked confused. Jennifer Torres just looked tired. But something had shifted. My father hadn't just paid them. He'd given them something more. He'd given them clarity. He'd given them acknowledgement. He'd given them a man who finally understood what he'd done. That's not the same as justice. But it's close. I watched him leave the mediation room. He looked 20 years older than he had 2 hours before. Robert Castellano was pale with professional fury. Victoria looked like a woman who just witnessed something unexpected. And I realized something sitting in that dark observation room. I'd prepared for a fight. I'd prepared to destroy my father, cross a civil trial that might last years. I'd prepared to humiliate him publicly, to expose every lie, to make sure everyone knew exactly what he was. But he'd walked into that mediation and done it himself. Not because I forced him, because he finally saw it. 3 days after the mediation, my mother called me. "Your father wants to see you," she said. "I don't think that's a good idea," I said. "I think it is. Please, Emma." I drove to the house on a cold November afternoon. My father was waiting in the kitchen. He looked diminished, not just sad, smaller, like something in him had collapsed. "Hi, Emma," he said. "Hi," I said. "Can we sit?" We sat at the kitchen table where he'd asked me to help him commit fraud a year ago, where this whole thing started. "I've been thinking about a lot of things," he said. "Since the mediation, since I made those disclosures, I've been thinking about what I did to you. I've been thinking about the real reason I approached you that day." "What do you mean?" I asked. "I was looking for someone to blame," he said. "When my business started to fail, I needed someone to blame. Not myself, never myself, but someone. I'd been cruel to you for years, distant, cold. I'd neglected you because you reminded me of things I didn't want to face. You reminded me of the fact that I was failing, that I had built nothing that really mattered." He looked at me directly. "When I asked you to help me defraud Sarah Chen, I wasn't really asking you to help me. I was asking you to confirm what I already believed about myself, that I was the kind of man who would ask his daughter to commit a crime, that I was the kind of man who would destroy her to save myself. And when you refused, I hated you for that refusal, because your refusal proved that I was exactly what I feared." "So you tried to destroy me," I said. "Yes." "You tried to make me complicit." "Yes." "You tried to convince everyone I was the criminal." "Yes, and when I finally saw what I was doing, I couldn't stop, because stopping meant I had to face myself, and I didn't want to do that." He put his hands flat on the table. "What you did," he said, "after the charges were dismissed, what you did with Sarah and Mr. Aukeffer and Jennifer, that was perfect." "What do you mean perfect?" I asked. "You could have disappeared. You could have rebuilt your reputation and moved on. You could have let me rot in my own lies. Instead, you made sure I would face the people I hurt. You made sure I would understand what I did. You made me see myself through their eyes." "I did that to hurt you," I said, "because there was no point in lying." "I know," he said, "but it was the best thing anyone could have done for me, because I needed to be hurt. I needed to be humiliated. I needed to lose. I needed to understand that my survival isn't more important than other people's security." I didn't say anything. "I'm going to lose the house," he said. "The settlement is going to require that. Your mother and I are going to have to start over. She's devastated, and I deserve that. I deserve to lose everything." "What are you going to do?" I asked. "I'm going to plead guilty to all charges. I'm not going to fight anymore. I'm going to accept whatever sentence the court gives me, and then I'm going to spend the rest of my life understanding the gravity of what I did." He looked at me. "I can't ask your forgiveness," he said. "That's not something you owe me, but I want you to know that you won. Not in the way I think you expected to win, but you won anyway. You're stronger than I am. You're better than I am. And you proved that not with anger or manipulation or lies. You proved it with clarity. You proved it with strategy. You proved it with the truth." "I feel like I should be happy," I said. "I feel like this should be victory." "Is it not?" he asked. "It doesn't feel like anything," I said. "It just feels empty." He nodded like he understood. "That's because you got what you wanted, but not what you needed," he said. "You wanted to hurt me. You got that. But what you needed was for me to change, for me to see you, for me to be the father you should have had. And you can't have that no matter how much money I lose or how much public shame I face. You can't get back what I took from you." I realized he was right. All of this, the investigation, the planning, the carefully documented evidence, the mediation, the financial disclosure, none of it changed the fact that my father had never been the man I wanted him to be. It had just made him acknowledge that he wasn't. "What happens now?" I asked. "I don't know," he said. "I don't think I get to make that decision. I think that's up to you." My father pleaded guilty in December. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for January. I didn't have to testify. The prosecutor had everything they needed, but I attended the hearing anyway. I sat in the back of the courtroom and listened to my father explain himself to a judge. He spoke carefully about what he'd done. He didn't make excuses. He didn't ask for leniency. He was, for the first time in his life, completely honest about the scope of his failure. The judge sentenced him to 4 years in federal prison. The gallery had been mostly empty. No press, no public attention by that point. The scandal had faded from the news. My father was no longer interesting. He was just a cautionary tale that other people whispered about. I watched him as the sentence was read. I watched him nod like he'd expected exactly this. Sarah Chen, Mr. Ackefer, and Jennifer Torres had all received partial settlement payments, not their full amounts. The criminal restitution would take years, but they had received something. They had received acknowledgement. Sarah wrote me an email after the sentencing. I don't know if what your father did has changed my life fundamentally. I'm not sure if there's any action that could fully repair what he took from me, but sitting across from him and hearing him admit what he did, that gave me something I didn't expect. It gave me permission to stop blaming myself. Thank you for making sure that happened. Mr. Ackefer called me. Your father has destroyed his reputation, he said. But he also saved his soul, I think. And that's more important than money. Tell him I forgive him, not because he deserves it, but because I can't carry that anger anymore. Jennifer Torres sent a handwritten letter. Your father will go to prison. That is justice in a way. But what matters more is that he finally told the truth. And because he told the truth, I can move forward. I can stop feeling like a fool. I can stop blaming myself for trusting him. That's worth more than any settlement. Thank you for being the kind of person who makes people face consequences. The world needs more people like you. I read these messages, and I realized something. I had gotten what I wanted. But I'd gotten it in a way I hadn't expected. I'd wanted to destroy my father, but he'd destroyed himself. All I'd done was make sure he couldn't run from that destruction. The question was, what did I want now? Because now that this was over, now that the legal processes were finished, now that my father was facing real consequence, what came next? I took a leave of absence from work. I rented a small cabin about 2 hours outside the city. I spent 2 weeks there doing nothing, reading, walking, sitting by the window and staring at bare trees. I thought about who I'd become. I'd become someone who could strategize, someone who could investigate, someone who could manipulate a situation to create a specific outcome, someone who could separate emotion from action. Those are powerful skills. But I'd also become someone who was alone. My mother had called several times. She was struggling. My father going to prison meant her life was being dismantled. She was going to lose the house. She was going to have to work. She was going to have to rebuild at an age when rebuilding is hard. I could help her. I should help her. But first, I had to decide what I wanted the rest of my life to look like. Did I want to be the kind of person who collects evidence and builds cases and strategically dismantles people, even people who deserve it? Or did I want to be the kind of person who lets things go? I called my mother on my last day at the cabin. Hi, Mom, I said. Emma, sweetheart, are you okay? I'm okay, I'm better. I wanted to talk to you about something. What? I want to help you with the house situation. I want to help you figure out what comes next. I want to be present for that. I've been focused on other things. I haven't been there for you. She cried a little. You don't have to do that, she said. You have your own life. I know I don't have to. I want to. The next day, I drove back to the city. I went to my apartment. I packed some things, and then I drove to my parents' house, or what used to be my parents' house. My mother was sitting in the kitchen when I arrived. We spent 3 hours going through financial documents, talking about what needed to happen, planning the next 6 months. It was clear work, practical work. It felt good to do something concrete rather than something strategic. 2 weeks later, my father left for federal prison. I wasn't there to see him go. Neither was my mother. But I attended a small family gathering the night before, just my mother, me, and Marcus, who had flown in from across the country. My father looked smaller than ever, but also, somehow, more at peace. Thank you for what you did, he said to me quietly, while my mother and Marcus were in another room. I know that sounds strange, but thank you. You gave me something I needed. I gave you consequence, I said. You gave me consequence, he agreed. And consequence is the only thing that could have saved me. He walked away. And I realized in that moment that I'd finally let go. Not of the pain, that's still there. That will probably always be there. It's woven into my history now. But I'd let go of the anger. I'd let go of the need to make sure he suffered. He was already suffering. The question was, did I want to spend my life suffering alongside him? The answer was no. I went back to work in February. Richard Harmon welcomed me back like I'd just taken a vacation, which was very much not the case, but I appreciated the grace. I built a new routine. I helped my mother navigate the legal and financial fallout of my father's conviction. We moved her into a small apartment in the city. She got a job at a bookstore. She's finding her footing. Marcus and I started calling each other every week. We talked about real things beyond politeness. Sarah Chen sent me a Christmas card the following December. She'd started a small investment advisory business for women who'd been through financial trauma. She was helping people avoid the mistakes she'd made. Mr. Ackhaffer's daughter is studying at Johns Hopkins. He sent me her photo. She looks happy. Jennifer Torres retired last year. She said it took 2 years longer than planned, but she got there. My father has written me twice from prison. I haven't answered either letter. I'm not sure if I will, but I'm not sure I won't either. What I know is that I'm not the same person I was. I'm not the person who thought the world was fair. I'm not the person who believed that truth and goodness were shields against betrayal. But I'm also not the person I became while planning revenge. I'm somewhere in the middle, someone who understands that people are complicated, that betrayal is real and consequences are necessary, and that sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be destroyed by what someone did to you. My father threw my belongings into the yard and said he didn't have a child like me. He was right. He didn't have a child like me. Because his actual child, the one I became in response to his cruelty, was someone far stronger than he'd ever be. And that's the only victory I need.